And I remember several weeks ago they had Army people at the Kentucky Derby with sidearms that were stopping people. And I wanted to ask Bob Chapman, is this exactly what Alex Jones has talked about, where they're getting us more used to seeing takeovers, and it's more used to seeing people in uniform of the military on our streets?
Yes, it's conditioning. And they're doing it in every country in the world that they can do it.
And, Chris, really, when you watch your television, the law and order type of programs or police detective programs, you notice they go to the front door and they don't say, knock on the door and say, I'm from the FBI. They're there. They got a SWAT team. They got their bulletproof vests on. They got this big instrument. They knock down the door and they rush in. They don't say, oh, FBI, we're from the FBI, They don't do that. I mean, they don't go in. They don't have warrants usually. It's simply the sort of things you'd see in a police state, and they're conditioning us that this is the way it's done. And it is not the way it's done in a free society. Even if you're dealing with drug dealers, you certainly don't just simply barge in the front door, and break it down, But this is what we're expecting now. They're doing it with little old ladies, because somebody gives them the wrong address, or maybe they want to question you about something, and they'll simply, break your door down, and they'll come in, they intimidate you, and they throw you on the ground. And why are they doing this? Why do they put handcuffs on people behind their back? It's to dehumanize them. It is all part of a psychological game they're playing on us, Dan. Anything else you want to say?
Well, just one thing. I listen to you, Bob, as much as I can. One of these days, we're not going to take it anymore. How about it, Bob?
Well, I think we still have a path open, and if we can get rid of the Fed and get tariffs put up, we may make it.
And Dan,
otherwise, if we can't do that, it's going to be a tough road.
Dan, the thing is, the last thing you want to do is people getting violent in the streets. Until the vast majority of the American people understand what's going on, nothing is going to change. We need the American people to believe in freedom and liberty and the Constitution, and that's got to be our message. Anyway, God bless. Thanks so much for calling, Dan.
Thank you, Stan.
Bye-bye. And our telephone number is 1-888-24-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-24-LIBERTY or 464-8295 if you have a question for Bob. Here on this Memorial Day, and I think we should remember the men who fought and died for our country, but remember that they were betrayed. They sent them to a no-win war in Korea. They sent them to a no-win war in Vietnam, and we lost both of those wars. And they said it's the first Gulf War. We did not win. We could have taken out Saddam Hussein. We didn't. The war in Iraq, why, of course, we've replaced one tyrant with another tyrant. There's no way you can hold those three countries together. They all hate one another. The Kurds hate the Sunnis who hate the Shias. You need three separate countries. We don't want that. We don't want stability. We're creating a situation of guaranteed instability. Why would you do something that's foolish? Why not let the Kurds have their own country and the Sunnis have their own country and the Shias have their country? There used to be 10% Christians in Iraq. There were under the wicked Saddam Hussein. But now with the heroic American forces there, all the Christians, or almost all of them, have been driven out or killed. Isn't it wonderful? We went in there to give these people democracy. And now, of course, we're still seeing the bombings continue. What about the Christians? Why are we concerned about all the Christians who have been slaughtered in Iraq because we went in? And anyway, Bob, go right ahead. Where do you think we're going next as far as the economy is concerned? Do you think that all this money they're putting out is going to, get things improving for a short period of time?
The stimulus package that's being dispersed this year is started off with the $250 checks to Social Security, and then the credit that is being sent out to individuals. That money will be used up by the end of July. We are told through surveys that about 90% of it would go toward paying debt. And so there's not going to be any splurge this year. So we're looking at a minus GDP in the fourth quarter of last year, 6.3%. The first quarter of this year, 6.1%. I estimate in the second quarter it'll be minus 5%, and the 2 quarters to the end of the year, minus 4%. Next year, a good part the stimulus package snaps in. And that'll end probably around September, October of next year. That could take the GDP down to even, but I don't think it's going to get any better than that. And so next year could be kind of a sideways year, but unemployment is not going to get better. It's going to stay down. In the following year after that, it's going to get much, much worse unless they have a program where they're not giving away almost $1 trillion to the public. They make it $2 or $3 trillion. And, of course, this is all reflected back on the dollar, the interest rates, and, of course, the prices of gold and silver. And so that's where we're going. That's where we're heading for. We're going to have hyperinflation. It began this month. You don't see it yet, but everything's in place. And this will evolve into next year. Inflation will get back up to 14% again, and it'll probably go higher as they pile more and more money in, because these people who created this monster behind the scenes, they don't know what to do. And we saw that at the Bilderberger meeting. They want to curtail this thing. It's out of control, out of their control, that is. And so the point is, we're headed for some real hard times.
Well, we got George calling us from Toronto. Hi, George. How are you doing?
Great, Dr. Stan. My question for Bob is, Bob, if the U.S. does decide to devalue the currency, are there any countries that are going to be saved? Like, are all countries going to have to do that, do you think?
It all depends on where they are financially. Unfortunately, 64.5% of foreign exchange reserves by other countries other than the United States are in dollars. And so if the dollar gets down 50% from here, which I think it will, they'll all lose 50% of what they got. So they're all going to be in the same spot. They're all going to devalue. They're all going to default, and that's when we're going to try to bring in a new world currency.
Okay.
And I think that basically everybody's in trouble. Everybody loses out except for the elite because, of course, they've moved into gold a long time ago. The Rockefellers have moved into gold. In fact, basically one of the Rockefeller family even went public and mentioned this. It was a woman, Dennis Cuddy tells the story, and that poor lady just happened to fall out of a very high hotel window shortly thereafter, and that was the end of her. We'll be back in just a moment to wrap up the program. Hang on, George. Bless.
Bye-bye. See you soon.
Well, this is Dr. Stan, and we do hope, of course, you enjoy our weekly conversations with Bob and that you are protecting yourself. I'm not a financial advisor, but I'll tell you what, an awful lot of people listened to us, 3 or 4 years ago. They got out of their homes. They sold them. They got into other things, that producing income, and they're sitting pretty now. And of course, we hope that you did what was suggested, but now at least you have an opportunity to get out of the stock market before it plunges again. And of course, they're not going to tell you this, but certainly markets are down, well, they went down almost 50%. They recovered a little bit, but certainly all throughout the world, people are losing the majority of what they have. And, of course, the insurance companies are invested in the stock markets and bonds, and they're falling. The pension funds are invested in stock markets and certainly in bonds, and they're falling. And, of course, so many of these fixed investments that people look to take care of them in their old age are simply not going to be there. Even Social Security is bankrupt. Medicare is bankrupt. They're putting out more than they're taking in. That's why, of course, they've got to modify Medicare, and, of course, so they can ration access to the health care, and they can let the older people die because, after all, 30% of the expense of taking care of older people is in the last year. Why not just kill them off? It would be the easiest thing to do, wouldn't it? Or would we do that in America? Yes, ladies and gentlemen. A nation that would send our boys overseas to fight and die in no-win wars we never intended to win. We're sending our boys into Afghanistan. They'll never win the war over there. We don't intend to win. We just intend to fight a long and bloody and horrible war. And, of course, the only way you can explain this is to understand there are evil people in charge.